If I didn't show up, no one would have noticed. That's the kind of family we are: name brands, power suits, air kisses. You could vanish into thin air and they'd just complain that the champagne was too warm. So when I walked into Aunt Victoria's marble-loaded mansion for the annual family gathering, I came dressed to disappear. Grey slacks, no tie, and my hair just messy enough to disqualify me from their worthy of a LinkedIn post standards. I found a quiet spot near the French doors and tried to blend into the wallpaper. It's an art form I've perfected over the years. Daniel, a voice chirped like champagne fizz, still pushing papers at that temp agency. I turned. Uncle Charles. Classic. Clutching a whiskey glass like a trophy. Executive assistant, actually. I replied with just enough confidence to keep his smirk from widening. Oh, he nodded, clearly uninterested now. Still at. What was it? Cloud? Consulting? Summit Solutions, I said. Quiet. Controlled. He didn't hear me or pretended not to. Then came Rachel, my cousin, decked out in a blood-red blazer that probably cost more than my first car. You know, Danny, she said, like she was offering life advice from Mount Olympus. If you want a real career, I could talk to someone at my firm. Maybe get you into paralegal work? I sipped my drink. That's generous. I lied. Because right now, back in my real office, the one none of them knew existed, there was a folder sitting on my desk waiting for my signature. A folder worth more than Rachel's entire portfolio. And here's the part they really wouldn't believe. I'm the CEO of one of the most sought-after consulting firms in the country, but I play the part they wrote for me. The assistant, the quiet one, the afterthought. Because 10 years ago, when I graduated top of my business class with a plan to reshape failing companies, I pitched it to this very family. And they laughed. Not politely, not with encouragement. They tore it to shreds. Aunt Victoria said the idea was a cute theory. Uncle Charles said I should start in the mailroom like everyone else. Everyone else, of course, meant the male cousins they groomed for power. I wasn't one of them. That night, I made a promise. I'd build something better than any of them could imagine. And I'd do it so quietly that by the time they realized, it would be too late. They think I serve coffee. They don't know I own the cafe chain. Let them laugh. It just makes the silence sweeter when it's time to strike. My first office was above a pizzeria that smelled like oregano and regret. There was mold on the ceiling, one chair that squeaked like a guilty conscience, and no air conditioning, just the constant hum of ambition and old pipes. That's where Summit Solutions began. I had about $12,000 in savings, no clients, no connections, just one sharp idea and the anger of being underestimated burning in my chest like a second sun. The irony? The Wilson family, the same ones sipping imported champagne, as they laughed at my theories, ran a business empire built on buying up dying companies, gutting them, and selling the bones. What I built? A company that did the opposite. I studied failures the way some people study chess. I knew how companies collapsed: bad leadership, bloated spending, outdated models, and, more importantly, I knew how to stop the bleeding. My first client was a local logistics firm, bleeding money and morale. Every big-name firm in the city turned them down. I didn't. I walked in, asked for access to everything, and promised nothing but effort. 3 months later, they were stable. 6 months later, they were profitable. I didn't post about it. I didn't even let them use my name in press releases. Discretion was part of the deal. Every employee I hired signed airtight NDAs. No press, no profiles. If you worked at Summit, you didn't talk about it. Not even at happy hour. You see, I wasn't just building a company, I was building a ghost. One that moved through the cracks of the system, quiet, effective, and invisible. And the Wilsons? They never saw it coming. They kept scooping up vulnerable companies like vultures. But one by one, the businesses started resisting, reorganizing, rebuilding. Our fingerprints were everywhere, but no one could trace them. Meanwhile, I kept playing my role, the humble assistant, the guy at the family functions who never quite figured it out. I even printed fake business cards, junior administrator, client services division, just in case anyone asked. Spoiler, they never did. Because the Wilsons weren't curious about people they didn't consider threats. They didn't notice I stopped showing up in a Corolla and started pulling into the parking garage in a black Tesla. They didn't ask why I always left early on Fridays or where I disappeared to every other quarter. They just assumed I was still beneath them. Perfect. By year 5, Summit Solutions had saved 27 companies. By year 7, we were consulting for a Fortune 100 retailer under a shell name. By year 10, we had offices in a dozen cities and controlled the outcome of more than $120 billion in restructuring deals. Still, I kept the office above the pizzeria. Not for nostalgia, for leverage. Because someday, I knew they'd try to take something from me that didn't belong to them. And when they walked into my conference room, still calling me the assistant, I wanted that moment to taste like irony, served cold, with a side of espresso from a cafe I also happened to own. Let them sleep on me. I wasn't done dreaming. The reunion was always a performance. Aunt Victoria loved spectacle the way narcissists love mirrors. This year it was all high ceilings, live jazz, and waiters in white gloves. The chandelier looked like it cost more than a public school's yearly budget. I wore a charcoal suit, off-rack, well-pressed, tasteful, forgettable. That's how I liked it, fitting into their world like background noise. Rachel spotted me by the garden doors, drink already in hand. "Daniel," she grinned, as if she were lowering herself to address a minor character. "You're still doing admin stuff, right? Or is it office logistics now?" I smirked. "Executive assistant, technically." "To?" she asked, faux interest clinging to her tone like hairspray. I took a sip of champagne. "Someone important." She laughed. "If you want something real, I could pitch you for a rotation at my firm. We always need someone who can schedule things and smile convincingly." That one almost made me spill my drink. I didn't react, not because I couldn't, but because silence has always been my sharpest weapon. Why draw your sword when the trap's already been set? Across the room, Uncle Charles, still allergic to humility, was regaling some poor interns with a tale about his latest acquisition. Something about Williams Manufacturing. I froze, just briefly. I knew that name. Of course I did. It was one of Summit's clients, one we'd been working with for months, because 3 months ago Williams came to us battered, cash flow erratic, bleeding investors. And behind the curtain, Aunt Victoria's company was circling them like buzzards. A classic Wilson move: buy the corpse, flip the shell, cash the check. Except Williams didn't die. We didn't let them. Under our plan, they restructured, refinanced, and implemented a system overhaul that doubled production output in 6 weeks. Their stock started climbing, quietly, steadily, predictably. Apparently the Wilsons noticed, because now I was holding a glass of Veuve Clicquot, listening to the family brag about how they were still in talks with a company I'd already rescued. And they didn't even know I was in the room. Perfect. I felt my phone buzz in the inner pocket of my blazer. A message from Leo. "Summit HQ urgent. Williams board wants us in on the merger talk. Wilson Ventures team requested meeting 9 a.m. tomorrow. They think we're a third party." I read it twice. So, that was it. They couldn't take Williams by force, so they wanted to buy their way in. Problem was, any merger had to be reviewed by Williams' consulting partner, which was me. I sipped again. a slow grin spreading behind the rim of the glass. "Something funny?" Rachel asked, watching me curiously. I shrugged. "Just thinking about tomorrow." She narrowed her eyes. "Big plans for someone who answers phones." I didn't bother replying. Why ruin the suspense? By morning, the mask was off. Well, not to them yet. But I was done hiding. I walked into Summit's flagship office in a navy custom suit. Tailored. Crisp. The kind of suit that didn't ask for attention but demanded respect. Leo met me outside the elevator with his usual dry smile and a tablet. "They're here," he said, barely hiding the glee. Aunt Victoria, cousin Rachel, and Charles. Playing finance expert. Do they look nervous? They look entitled. Excellent. I adjusted my cuffs. Have they had coffee? Victoria complained about the lack of staff. I told her the admin would be in shortly. I almost laughed. I had served these people coffee more times than I could count. Once, Victoria actually handed me her coat and forgot to say, "Thank you." She never looked at my face, just assumed I was nobody. Today, I'd be the one holding her future. "Give me 2 minutes," I said. "Then bring the contracts." I walked slowly toward the main conference room, past the frosted glass. I could hear their voices. Victoria's clipped diction, Rachel's smug laugh, Charles doing his best imitation of someone important. I adjusted my lapel and opened the door. The silence was immediate. Victoria was seated at the head of the table, my seat. Rachel and Charles flanking her, all in designer suits, all looking like they expected someone to serve them. "Where's your CEO?" Victoria asked, not even bothering to greet me. I walked past them, unbothered, and took my seat directly across from her. She blinked. "Excuse me, I don't serve coffee anymore," I said calmly. "And that seat belongs to the guest." Leo walked in at that moment, crisp and silent, placing folders in front of each of them. "Merger proposal documents as requested," he said. Victoria leaned back slowly. "I asked where your CEO is." "You did," I nodded. "And I'm here." Rachel laughed like she thought it was a joke. "Then she didn't. You," she scoffed. "You're the CEO of Summit Solutions since day one." Charles leaned forward, confused. "You've been pretending to be your own assistant?" I smiled, all teeth. "You've been pretending to be a financial expert for 2 decades. I figured I'd give it a try." Leo chuckled under his breath. Victoria's face hardened. "This is absurd. You can't seriously think I don't think," I interrupted. I know that you failed to acquire Williams through hostile measures. I know that their board sought us out to protect themselves. I know you tried to underbid and bluff your way in. And I know," I continued, tapping the table, "that for the past 10 years, Summit Solutions has quietly blocked nearly every one of your firm's predatory acquisitions. Peterson Logistics, ours. Harbortech, ours. Davidson Group. Saved them 2 weeks before your offer went live." Rachel's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "This is war," Victoria said quietly, voice cold as steel. "No," I said. "This is business. The kind you told me I'd never understand." Leo handed her one final folder. A controlling interest acquisition option. "If you refuse the terms," I added, "Summit will begin purchasing Wilson Ventures stock on the open market. We've already met with your board. Some are less loyal than you assumed." Rachel looked pale. Charles looked like he wanted to run. "Victoria?" She smiled. But it was the wrong kind of smile, the kind people wear when they've already lost and don't want to give you the satisfaction of seeing them break. "I underestimated you," she admitted. "No," I said, standing. "You dismissed me. You never even thought to estimate." I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and the vineyard that makes the champagne you served last night. I bought it last year. I turned my head. The pizzeria below my first office? Mine now too. Leo opened the door. Enjoy the coffee, I said. It's from my cafe chain. You're welcome. Then I left them behind with nothing but their signatures and my shadow. I wish I could say they took it gracefully, but the Wilsons don't lose. Not publicly, not quietly, which is why within 3 hours of leaving that meeting, I received a barrage of messages, emails, texts, even a missed call from Charles, who hadn't dialed my number since I was 13 and needed a ride home from soccer. I didn't answer a single one. Let them stew. Victoria, naturally, didn't go down without a fight. She stormed into Summit HQ around noon, pushing past the receptionist like she owned the floor. Leo intercepted her at the elevator, but I waved him off. Let her in. She needed to see what losing looked like up close. She entered my office with the grace of a hurricane in heels. You think you've won? She snapped, eyes cold, mouth sharp. This is a tantrum, a vendetta. You're destroying your own family. I didn't look up right away. I finished the email I was writing, hit send, and only then turned to her. Family, I repeated. That's what you're calling it now? She crossed her arms. You were nothing. We tried to help you. You spat on that. No, I said. Calm. You ignored me. Mocked me. I asked for a meeting to present a business model, and you told me to join the mailroom and wait my turn. You offered me a closet and called it opportunity. That's tradition, she hissed. It's how the Wilson legacy works. Then consider this a legacy update. She took a step forward. You went behind our backs. I went forward while you stood still. Her eyes narrowed. You really think you're better than us? No, I said. Just smarter and faster. And done waiting for your approval. I slid a folder across the desk. Inside, final merger terms. Revised. More generous than she deserved. You can stay on as a consultant, I said, if you agree to Summit's restructuring model. No more gutting companies. No more hostile takeovers. We build now, not destroy. And if I refuse, then we move forward without you. Your golden parachutes on page 3. She opened the folder slowly, as if the pages might burn her. Her mouth twitched when she saw the numbers. She hated them because she couldn't argue with them. You've planned every angle, she muttered. I smiled. 10 years gives you time. She looked up at me, really looked for the first time. You're not the same boy who used to carry my shopping bags. No, I said. That boy learned to carry empires instead. She left without another word. The press got wind of it within 24 hours. The headline on the business blogs read like fiction, the assistant who owned the boardroom. Some just went with the shock value. Summit CEO revealed as Wilson Black Sheep. My inbox exploded. The internet did what it always does, memes, theories, TikToks. Someone found a photo from a Wilson holiday party 5 years ago with me in the corner, pouring drinks. That image went viral overnight. Victoria tried to spin it, called it a shared success, claimed she always knew Daniel had potential. So I leaked the video. Last year's reunion. Her voice clear, crisp and unmistakable, Daniel. He still works admin. Poor thing. We'll find him a wife who doesn't mind mediocrity. That clip? 8.7 million views in 48 hours. She stopped talking to reporters after that. Rachel was next. She showed up at my office, unannounced hair slicked back, makeup sharp, briefcase in hand. I want to talk, she said, already halfway through the door. I leaned back. Talk fast. You've humiliated this family. No, I said. You did that. I just held up a mirror. She bristled. Look, I get it. You played the long game. Kudos. But maybe it's time to move forward. Together. I raised an eyebrow. A partnership, she said. You and me, Wilson Summit. Combine our brands, go global, dominate. I stared at her. You're offering me an alliance with the same people who once told me to fetch their dry cleaning. That was business, she said flatly. This is business too. No, I replied. This is ego and desperation. And I don't do joint ventures with ghosts. She didn't argue, just stood there as if waiting for me to change my mind. I didn't. Charles didn't even bother pretending to be strategic. He sent me a 4-paragraph email begging for a second chance, included a spreadsheet, tried to show me how much value he could bring. I didn't open the attachment. I just replied with 2 words, too late. But the most unexpected message came from someone else entirely, my mother. She had divorced out of the Wilson family 2 decades earlier. Smart woman. Didn't stick around for the toxicity. We'd stayed in loose contact holiday texts, occasional updates. Her message was just 1 sentence. I always knew you were playing chess. I stared at it longer than I'd stared at any contract this year, because she had known. She'd seen me working late nights, taking odd meetings, keeping quiet while the rest of the family roared. I replied with 3 words. Checkmate, Mom. Finally. By the end of the week, the Wilson board had accepted our merger terms. Summit took over 60% stake. I replaced half their executive team with our people. We redrafted acquisition policy, instituted ethical audits, cancelled 2 pending hostile takeovers. Victoria took her golden parachute and disappeared into the European villa circuit. Rachel went radio silent. Charles tried to sue, lost in arbitration. And me? I hosted a leadership summit in the same conference room where I used to serve coffee, brought in partners from 5 cities. Leo stood beside me, reading off growth forecasts like a man presenting gospel. After the meeting, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee from my own brand, watching traffic crawl beneath the skyline. I used to dream about this view. Now it was mine. No more secrets. No more pretending. Just power, built 1 quiet step at a time, and I hadn't even started the next move yet. I expected chaos. What I got was silence. Not the calm kind, the tense humming quiet that comes just before a storm breaks loose. By Monday, the Wilson family group chat had gone dead. The same thread that used to ping endlessly with investment wins, yacht selfies, and passive-aggressive party invites now sat untouched. No one wanted to be the first to acknowledge what had happened, but the cracks started showing fast. By Tuesday, 3 Wilson Ventures board members had resigned. One issued a public statement citing long-standing ethical disagreements. By Thursday, Summit's restructuring proposal was trending on business Twitter. The phrase, ethical capitalism isn't an oxymoron, had made its way into 3 think pieces. We were suddenly the poster child for conscious corporate governance. And by the end of the week, Wilson Ventures stock jumped 41%. Not because of their legacy, but because of ours. I thought it might end there. But things have a way of circling back when you least expect it. A month after the merger finalised, I got a knock on my office door. Leo popped his head in. "You've got a visitor," he said. "Didn't schedule. Says it's personal. Family. Technically, that could mean anything. But when the door opened, I didn't expect to see her. Victoria. She looked different. No power heels. No armour. Just a black coat. Hair pulled back. Face stripped of whatever shield she used to wear. She sat without being asked. "I'm not here to argue," she said. I nodded. "Then we can skip the part where you call me disloyal." She didn't flinch. "You were loyal, just not to us." "To who then?" I asked. She looked around the office, at the glass panels and clean design, at the wall-size screen still showing our company growth metrics. To yourself, she said. That's not something our family ever encouraged. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't come here to apologize, did you? No, she said. But I came to say you were right. Now that was unexpected. I spent years building a machine that devoured companies. You built one that saved them. The irony isn't lost on me. I didn't do it for irony, I replied. I know, she said. You did it for justice. That word hung in the air. I came to drop something off, she added, and reached into her bag. A letter, handwritten, heavy paper, no return address. What is it? My resignation, she said, standing up. From the family. I blinked. Excuse me? I've spent decades maintaining a name that doesn't mean anything anymore. I'm retiring. Quietly, off-grid. Maybe I'll write, garden, or just learn how to breathe again. She walked to the door, then paused. I never said this before, Daniel, but you played the long game better than any of us ever knew. Then she was gone. 2 weeks later, the Business Innovation Awards held their annual gala. I'd been nominated before, always anonymously, under a project code or holding company. But this time, my name was front and center. I stood on stage in a tailored suit that fit like armor and addressed a room filled with the very people who once thought Daniel Wilson was just a name on a support email. I talked about failure, about invisibility, about how being underestimated can become your greatest advantage. And I ended with this: real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to dominate rooms or own headlines. It sits, it waits. And when the moment's right, it shows up in a suit you didn't see coming, carrying papers you never thought to read. That's the kind of power I believe in, and that's the kind we build at Summit. The applause lasted longer than I expected, maybe because they recognized something in the story, or maybe because they knew what it felt like to be told they'd never make it, only to outlast the ones who said it. What followed was what I can only call peace, not the absence of conflict kind, the hard-earned kind, the kind that lives in your bones after a long, bitter winter finally gives up and lets spring win. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, quietly. No press. Just backroom coffees and whiteboard sketches in unused offices. Leo got promoted. He now runs the New York branch. Williams Manufacturing became a case study for 3 Ivy League business schools. And Summit? We grew, but we didn't grow louder. We just kept saving companies one after another. No announcements, just results. Last week, I got an invitation. The Wilson Family Reunion. This time, hosted not by Victoria, not by Charles or Rachel, but by me. Funny how that works. We're holding it in the main Summit boardroom, the same one where I once served coffee to people who didn't look me in the eye. Now I'd be at the head of the table, again, but not for revenge, not anymore. This was about closing the loop. I walked into the boardroom early that morning. The sun poured through the glass walls like a spotlight. Everything gleamed. Leo entered a few minutes later with a tray of coffee freshly brewed from my cafe chain, of course. You want me to pour it for them? He joked. I shook my head. No, I said. Let them do it themselves this time. He smirked and left. I sat down at the table, placed a notepad in front of me, old habit, and waited. One by one they entered, cautious, polished, unsure. But this time, they looked me in the eye, they nodded, they used my title, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to prove anything, not to them, not to anyone. Somewhere, in a locked drawer upstairs, I still keep the old business card, Daniel Wilson, administrative assistant. I kept it not as a souvenir, but as a reminder. That power doesn't always show up in fireworks. Sometimes it shows up with a clipboard and a half smile. Sometimes it gets your coat and brings your coffee. Sometimes it waits patiently in the corner of a family reunion while quietly building a kingdom that one day everyone else will need permission to enter. And when they ask who built it, I'll smile, sip my coffee, and say, the assistant story too, I still remember the sound, the soft tear of wrapping paper, no chatter, no music. Just that small, hopeful sound as my daughter, Elia, unwrapped her present with careful fingers. She was 8, all heart, all imagination, the kind of kid who still believed in magic. And for a moment, her face lit up like it was Christmas morning because, well, it was. Then she opened the box, and everything in her face just dropped. No toy, no card, no paper. Just an empty box with nothing but air and a cardboard bottom. I felt it before I saw it, the twist in my gut. Something was wrong. Maybe it was a packing error. Maybe the gift slipped out somehow. I barely had time to open my mouth before my dad, Tom, let out this short, sharp laugh, like someone coughing up contempt. Kids like her shouldn't expect much. World's got enough freeloaders already. That shut me down. Elia froze, her hands still inside the box like maybe she'd missed something. Her eyes flicked up to me, confused, hurt, but not crying yet. Then my sister, Leslie, casually threw in her poison. She's just like her mum, always expecting something for nothing. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just sat there, jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. Elia looked at me, again silent, strong, asking with her eyes whether she should pretend it didn't hurt. That moment, that exact second, is burned into me. I hated myself for bringing her here, for trying, for believing idiotically that things would be different this time. That they'd see her, that maybe they'd see me, but they didn't. To them, Elia was just a smaller version of the daughter who divorced young, who didn't live up to their mold, who couldn't check all the boxes they expected from a real family. The room was dead silent except for the grandfather clock ticking behind my dad's recliner and the low hum of the heater. Elia's little shoulders drew in. Her fingers brushed the edges of the empty box once more. And then, without a word, she folded the flaps closed. And then she said, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, "I got you a gift too, Grandpa." Everyone turned. Tom didn't even blink. "Oh, yeah?" he smirked. "This should be good." Elia didn't flinch. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, small and neat, and walked up to him. And I swear I could feel something shift in the room. We hadn't been back for Christmas since the year everything collapsed. My divorce, the fallout, the distance. I had told myself Elia didn't need to see that part of the family. But this year, she asked, "Do I have a grandpa?" That was her real question. Why were our holidays so quiet? Why didn't we have cousins, or loud dinners, or matching pajamas and chaos? So I said yes. And when she asked if we could visit, I said yes again. I wanted her to know where she came from, even if it wasn't perfect. I wanted her to have a Christmas memory with them, even if it was just once. The second we pulled into the driveway, I felt it. That weight, like putting on an old, too tight jacket. Their house was pristine. Not cozy, not warm. Just spotless and stiff, like it was afraid to be lived in. My mother greeted us at the door with her usual practiced politeness. A half hug for me, a light pat for Elia, then a disapproving glance at the mud on Elia's boots. Leslie barely glanced up from her phone. Dad was in his recliner, of course. Didn't even stand, Just muttered, "Didn't think you'd actually show." Elia gave him a shy wave. "Hi, Grandpa," he grunted. But she tried. God, she tried. She made hand-drawn cards for everyone, had me help spell out each name. She worked on them every night for a week, carefully folding them into envelopes and tucking them in her coat. I scraped together what I could to buy her one nice dress, a small gift to unwrap, gas money to make the trip. That morning, as I tied her scarf, she looked up and asked, "Do you think they'll like my drawings?" And I said, "They'll love them." But my stomach already knew the truth. Inside, the air was tight. Everyone was polite, cold, and distant in the way that feels worse than being yelled at. Elia handed out her drawings like they were treasure. One by one, with care. Even to my brother Ethan, who hadn't said more than 2 words to us. When she got to Tom, she hesitated, but still "Merry Christmas, Grandpa." He didn't even look at her, just reached out one hand like she was handing him junk mail. Still, she smiled, sat next to me on the couch. Then Tom reached under the tree, pulled out a large silver box, wrapped too perfectly. "Got your name on it," he said with a shrug. She looked at me, waiting for permission. I nodded, though I had a knot in my chest. She opened it slowly, savouring each moment, like she was unwrapping magic. Then came the silence, the pause, and then her face changed. She looked inside, reached around, lifted a flap. It was empty. He laughed, loud this time. "What? Expecting something real?" "The world doesn't hand out freebies, kid." I didn't breathe. Leslie snorted from the couch, just like her mum, always expecting something. And that was the moment I saw it. The light leave my daughter's eyes, just a little. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just sat there, holding the box like it might still change if she waited long enough. I should have said something. Should have stood up, but I froze. That's what this house does to you. It teaches you to shrink. But Elia, she didn't shrink. She looked at Tom and said, "It's okay. I got you a gift too." And then she walked across the room, pulled that folded piece of paper from her coat and held it out with both hands. I didn't even know what was on it, but I felt it in my chest. Something was coming. The room went still, like the moment right before thunder hits. Elia stood there, holding that paper out like it was the most important thing in the world. She didn't say anything, didn't try to explain. She just waited, calm, small, brave. Tom didn't even look up at first. "What is it?" he muttered, not even pretending to care. "Did you draw me a stick figure or something?" His voice had that same edge. It always carried sarcasm, like a knife he didn't bother hiding. But Elia didn't flinch. She took another step toward him, arms still out. That paper trembling just a little in her hands. And finally, he reached for it, still sitting, still holding his whiskey glass in his other hand. He unfolded it slowly, lazy, barely paying attention. Until he did, I didn't see the drawing. Not right away. I was still across the room, half frozen, but I saw his face change. He blinked. Once, twice. Then he stopped. Completely, like someone had hit pause. No snark, no laugh. Just stillness. "What is it?" Leslie asked, annoyed. "She draw you crying or something?" He didn't respond, not even a grunt. Elia didn't move either. Just stood there, hands clasped in front of her, watching him. I got up, walked across the room, slow, like I didn't want to break something delicate. I placed a hand on Elia's back. She leaned into it just a little, still watching Tom. He looked older all of a sudden. Not mean, not smug, just tired. He folded the paper back up, gently, like it meant something. And he set it on the table next to him. Then without a word he stood up. No one spoke. He didn't yell, didn't sigh. He just left the room. We heard his footsteps down the hallway, then nothing. No slammed door, no explanation, just gone. I looked down at Elia. Her voice was quiet. Did I do something wrong? I knelt beside her, wrapped my arms around her, and whispered, "No, honey." "You did something strong," she nodded. Didn't cry. Just sat with me on the floor for a few seconds, like she was letting it all settle. Leslie muttered something, but I didn't even listen. I was too focused on Elia, on her stillness, on how she'd walked into a room of adults and handed someone who didn't deserve her a piece of her heart and didn't break when they didn't know what to do with it. Whatever she drew, it cracked something open in Tom. He didn't come back that night, not for dinner, not for dessert. Not even when my mum, always pretending, called out in that overly cheerful voice that the pie was ready. Elia didn't mention him again either, just quietly played with one of the ribbons from her other gift and helped me fold wrapping paper like it was any other Christmas evening. But I could tell she was thinking about him. Her eyes kept drifting to that hallway, waiting, hoping. We left early the next morning. I told them we had plans back in the city, but the truth was I was done. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't sit in that house and act like nothing happened. My mum handed me a foil-wrapped plate of leftover ham and said, "Drive safe." No mention of the gift. No mention of Tom's disappearance. Leslie didn't even get up. Elia was quiet on the ride home. Just stared out the window, watching the snow melt off pine branches. I reached over and held her hand. She squeezed back. I didn't ask about the drawing. I didn't want to pull apart something so personal, but I thought about it the whole way home, about what could possibly make Tom the same man who once told me tears were weakness, go silent and walk away. Whatever it was, it got through to him. Not with anger, not with guilt, but with truth. 4 days later, we got a package at small brown box. No return address, just Elia's name written on the top in shaky block letters. She opened it carefully, cautious, like she wasn't sure if she should hope. Inside was a wooden music box. Simple, hand-carved, little painted roses around the lid. When she turned the crank, it played Somewhere Over the Rainbow. The notes were soft, fragile even, like they'd been waiting years to be heard again. There was a note inside, just one line. "To the bravest girl I know. Thank you for remembering her." No name. But we didn't need one. Elia held the box to her chest like it was made of gold. Didn't say anything for a while, just held it. I sat down next to her, quiet. Then I finally asked, "Elia, what did you draw for him?" She looked up. "It was a picture," she said, "of him, holding hands with Grandma and me." She paused, then added, "I told him I hope he smiles again someday, because I remember how she made him laugh." I had to swallow hard, real hard, because that was it. That was the version of him I'd buried, the one who used to smile, the one who used to laugh when my mum teased him during dinner, the one who existed before the grief made him bitter, before the silence hardened into a wall. I forgot he was ever soft. But Elia didn't. She never even met my mum, but she remembered him through the stories I told, through the photos on our shelf, through the way I sometimes paused at her picture without meaning to. And she gave that version of him back, in a way I never could. Now that music box sits on her nightstand. She winds it up sometimes before bed, not always to hear it. Sometimes she just holds it, like it's a piece of something bigger than either of us. A thread she's holding on to. She still doesn't talk much about that day. But every now and then she mentions Grandma, talks about her like she knows her, and maybe in some strange way, she does. Tom never called, never sent a follow-up message. That's not his way. But a week after the music box showed up, I got a letter. 3 lines. I was wrong about you. She's a good kid. Hope you're okay. No name, but I knew. And for some reason, I still can't explain. I cried after reading it. Not because it fixed anything. Not because it erased the years of silence or the way he used to look through me like I was made of fog, but because for once it felt like he saw me. And more than that, he saw her. People ask me why I went back that Christmas, why I let them meet Elia, why I didn't shield her better, why I didn't protect her from all that coldness, and I used to feel guilty about that. For letting her walk into a room that didn't know how to love her the way she deserved, for putting hope where I should have known better. But I don't feel guilty anymore, because she didn't need me to protect her from the truth. She needed the truth so she could face it, so she could decide who she wanted to be in the middle of it. She didn't come out bitter. She came out shining. That's who she is. She doesn't fight fire with fire. She doesn't yell or tear people down. She doesn't even need to be loud. She walks in with her little paper heart, and somehow people soften. Not all of them. Not always, but enough. A few months after that visit, I found the letter again, the one Tom sent. Tucked behind a cookbook on the counter, I don't even remember putting it there, I read it. Those 3 lines. It didn't fix anything, but it mattered. Because that man, the one who once told me crying made me weak, the one who laughed at an empty box on Christmas, took the time to write something down. In his own hand. Not for show, not for forgiveness. Just because something inside him moved, and he didn't know how else to say it. Elia never asked about him again, not directly. But every now and then, when we're lying on the floor doing puzzles or watching the shadows on the ceiling, she'll hum somewhere over the rainbow. Just softly. Like a memory she didn't live, but still carries. Sometimes I think about how much power one little drawing had, not because it was fancy, not because it was some perfect piece of art, but because it said what needed to be said in the simplest way. I see who you were. I hope that part of you still exists. A year passed. We didn't visit again. I sent a card at Christmas, but didn't hear back. No surprise. That house still runs on silence and pride. Always has. Probably always will. But Elia had her music box, and her memory, and her peace. And that was enough, until one day she came home from school, pulled out her backpack and said, "Mum, do you think Grandpa ever smiled again?" I didn't lie. I think maybe he did, at least once more. That seemed to satisfy her. She nodded, turned the crank on her music box, and sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees. That was the thing about her. She didn't need proof to believe in people. Just a little space, a little light, and she gave both without asking anything in return. A few weeks later, I got a voicemail. Unknown number, man's voice. Short, unsteady. Just calling to say I kept the picture. Still have it on the side table. That's all. Click. No name, no return call number. But again, I knew. And honestly, I didn't need more, because that was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. And for once, it felt like enough. Sometimes, the people who hurt us most are the ones who forgot how to feel. Not because they were born cruel, but because life scraped something out of them and they never found the tools to build it back. Tom was one of those people. He built walls so high even he forgot what was on the other side. But Elia? She reached through one of those cracks and passed him a piece of sunlight. No shouting, no lecture, just a folded piece of paper with a memory he thought was gone. And that memory? It didn't erase the years. It didn't fix everything, but it opened a door, not wide, but wide enough. Now, every Christmas, Elia places that music box on the table beside her cocoa. She never says it's from him, never even labels it, but she cranks it, lets it play. The song fills the room, soft and slow, like a memory you forgot you needed. And I sit beside her, holding her hand, thinking about how sometimes kindness is the strongest kind of power, not because it changes everything, but because it reminds people they can change. Even if it's just a little, even if it's just once. They say family is forever, but I've learned that isn't always true. What is forever are the small moments that shape us. A music box on a snowy night, a drawing passed into trembling hands, a little girl choosing compassion over bitterness. Those things last because they're rooted in choice, in love, in the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And if that's what Elia remembers from that Christmas, not the empty box, not the silence, not the cruelty, but the gift she gave, then maybe that was the real gift after all. Story 3. If you told me a year ago that a stack of pancakes would change the course of my life, I'd have laughed in your face. I was 31, single, and had been working at Maple's Diner for going on 8 years. The place was sandwiched between a run-down hardware store and a dry cleaner that somehow always smelled like burnt toast. I lived alone above a tiny pharmacy, with neighbours I never saw and family I rarely heard from. My life was small, predictable, quiet. Every morning, I'd tie on the same worn-out apron, pour burnt coffee into chipped mugs, and smile at the same tired faces, regulars who talked more to their eggs than to me. And every morning I'd go home, heat up some sad frozen dinner, and fall asleep to the hum of the fridge. That was before the kid. He showed up one Tuesday in October. The kind of chilly morning that hinted winter was coming for our bones. I noticed him right away, not because he was loud, but because he was the opposite. He was maybe 9 or 10, small for his age, with eyes too serious for someone who should still be worried about recess. He picked the corner booth, the one nobody wanted, because it caught the draft, and ordered a glass of water. That's it, just water. Didn't speak much. Barely nodded when I brought it to him. Next morning? Same booth, same water, same silence. By the end of the week, it was clear this wasn't a one-time thing. He came in every school day at 7:10, sat for 45 minutes reading some fantasy book that looked older than both of us combined, then left. Never ordered a thing beyond that glass. By week 3, I couldn't take it anymore, so I accidentally brought him pancakes. "Oh, shoot," I said, pretending to be flustered as I set the plate down. The kitchen messed up. They made an extra. "You mind if I leave it here instead of tossing it?" He looked at me like I'd just offered him a winning lottery ticket and a trap at the same time. "It's okay," I added. "No charge. Better to eat it than waste it, right?" I walked off before he could argue. A few minutes later, I peeked over the counter and saw him eating like he hadn't eaten properly in days, maybe weeks. That became our routine. Every morning there'd be a kitchen mistake waiting at his table. Eggs, toast, oatmeal when it got cold. He never asked for anything, never initiated a conversation. Just a quiet thank you every time I cleared his plate, which was always wiped clean. His name? I didn't know. Where he lived? No idea. Why he never came with a parent? Your guess was as good as mine. All I knew was that he was hungry, not just for food, but for safety, for quiet, for someone not to question why he kept looking over his shoulder like the world was out to get him. People noticed, of course. Harold, our grumpy regular with opinions about everything, finally asked, "Who's the kid? He yours?" "Just someone who likes pancakes," I replied. Kathy, who ran the grill, wasn't so subtle. "You feeding strays now?" "He's just a kid," I said. She softened, but still warned me, strays don't stick around. Don't get too attached. I didn't listen. I knew what it was like to be that kid, to pretend you weren't hungry because you were more afraid of pity than pain. So I kept feeding him, even when people made comments. Even when Mark, the diner's manager, called me into the back office and said, "This looks bad, Claire. You can't be giving away food for free. I'll pay for it out of my tips." Mark looked at me like I was nuts. "You barely make rent. It's fine. 1 meal a day. I'll make it work." He grumbled but let it go. For 6 weeks it continued. Then one Thursday he didn't show. I waited, still brought his pancakes, left them at the usual booth. They went cold. The next day, nothing. And the next. After a week, the absence began to feel like a bruise. I still made his food each morning, just in case. I told myself he'd be back. That kids disappear sometimes. But deep down, I started to believe what Kathy had said, strays don't stay. Maybe he got caught. Maybe he ran. And it hurt more than I expected. People noticed. Some snickered. One customer even snapped a photo of the untouched plate and posted it to a local Facebook group. I only knew because Kathy shoved her phone in my face a few days later. There it was. My pancakes, his empty booth, and a snide caption, "Maple's now feeding ghosts," or running a scam. The comments were worse. Fake charity. Publicity stunt. She probably pockets the food. That night, I cried for the first time in months. Not just because of the boy, but because for once, I'd let someone in even silently, and now that space felt hollow. I sat on my bed and pulled out my dad's old army journal. He used to say, "You don't need a reason to be kind. You just need to remember what it felt like when someone was kind to you. That kid, whoever he was, needed pancakes. I could give him that." 23 days after he stopped showing up, I still made him a plate. That's when everything changed. It started with silence. You ever hear a diner go quiet? I was pouring coffee when I noticed everyone had stopped talking, forks frozen mid-air, heads turned toward the window. I followed their gaze. 4 black SUVs. Government plates. They rolled up like a convoy and parked right outside. Doors opened in perfect sync. Men in uniform stepped out, all serious faces and clean shoes. The kind of people who don't order breakfast, they command it. Then one man stepped forward, taller, older, weathered like a sun-scorched leather jacket, dress uniform, medals gleaming. He walked through the door like he owned the ground he stood on. "Can I help you?" Mark asked, trying to sound authoritative but squeaking like a balloon. "I'm looking for Claire Hudson," the man said. I froze, coffee pot in hand. "That's me," I said. Somehow, the man removed his cap. "My name is Colonel David Reeve, Special Forces Command." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "I'm here because of a promise made by one of my men." And with that, my world stopped turning. When I took the envelope from Colonel Reeve's hand, it felt heavier than it should have been. Like it carried more than just a piece of paper, like it held grief, truth, and maybe something I wasn't ready for. My hands trembled as I looked down at it, and I couldn't stop the question from slipping out. "Is he okay?" "The boy?" The colonel nodded gently. "He's safe, with his grandparents in Colorado now. But he's been through a lot, more than most adults ever should." The entire diner was silent, every eye on us. Even the guy who always asked for extra bacon without tipping was quiet for once. The colonel continued. The boy you fed, his name's Daniel Thompson. His father, Master Sergeant James Thompson, served under me for 9 years, one of the finest men I've ever known. My stomach sank when I heard the was in his tone. He was deployed to Afghanistan 6 months ago. Before he left, he made arrangements, emergency funds, care plans, but the Colonel's jaw clenched. Shortly after James deployed, Daniel's mother walked out. No warning, no goodbyes, just gone. And Daniel? He didn't tell anyone. Not his teachers, not the neighbours. He was terrified of being taken away, of being sent somewhere strange, so he stayed, alone. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He used what money his dad left to get by, the Colonel said, but it only lasted so long. He didn't ask for help. He didn't want to be a burden. He just survived. And then, one day, he found your diner. I couldn't look at him. I just stared at the counter, blinking away the sting in my eyes. My heart ached for Daniel, for the quiet kid with the oversized backpack and eyes that had already seen too much. He told us, the Colonel said, voice softening, that you never asked questions, never made him feel less than, that you just gave him food and treated him like he belonged there. I nodded slowly. Because he did. The Colonel pulled out the letter. This was written by James. We found it in his pack after he didn't come home. He asked, if anything ever happened to him, that we find the woman at the diner, the one feeding his son. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I need you to find the woman named Claire at the diner near my boy's school. Daniel said she gave him pancakes without asking why he was hungry. Said she smiled at him like he mattered. That's no small thing. Please thank her for me. Tell her she didn't just feed my son, she gave him something to hold on to. Dignity, normalcy, a little bit of peace. The ink blurred as my tears dropped onto the page. I didn't know who he was, I whispered. I just saw a kid who needed something, the Colonel smiled, just barely. Sometimes that's enough. Then he did something that caught everyone off guard. He saluted me. A full, crisp, formal military salute. And behind him, every single uniformed person in that diner stood, turned to me, and did the same. I'd never felt so small or so seen. Mark, my manager, stood beside the coffee machine, looking like he'd just swallowed his tie. Kathy had tears in her eyes. Even Harold, crusty old Harold, muttered something that sounded like damn good job before looking away. The moment passed like a slow breeze, heavy, quiet, sacred. That day changed everything. The story spread faster than I could wrap my head around. First, it was whispered among the regulars. Then, someone posted about it on Facebook. By the next week, a local news station had called, asking to interview the pancake waitress. I didn't want any of that. I wasn't looking for a spotlight. I just didn't want the boy to go hungry. But the attention came anyway. People started leaving notes with their tips. Strangers sent cards. One woman drove 2 hours just to sit in Daniel's old booth, order his usual, and quietly say thank you. Mark even did a full 180. He hung an American flag near the booth where Daniel used to sit, and below it, he placed a small brass plaque, reserved for those who serve and the ones who wait. That booth was never empty again. Veterans, active duty soldiers, even struggling families started showing up. And no matter what, they got fed. No questions, no judgment. Mark said it was my policy now. Claire's rule, he called it, trying to play it off like it wasn't a big deal, but I caught him wiping his eyes when no one was looking. One morning, about a week after the Colonel's visit, a package showed up addressed to me. No return address. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was a little messy, like someone still getting used to writing in cursive. but I'd know the voice anywhere. Dear Miss Clare, I didn't know your name until the day the soldiers came. I only knew you as the lady who never made me feel weird, the one who brought pancakes like it was an accident, but I knew it wasn't. I just didn't know how to say thank you without crying. My grandparents are nice. Grandpa is teaching me to fix fishing rods. Grandma bakes cookies that don't taste like the ones from the gas station. I still miss my dad, but I think he would have liked you. He always said kindness didn't need an explanation. Thanks for seeing me. Even when I couldn't talk, even when I didn't know how to ask for help, you helped anyway. Your friend, Daniel Thompson, P.S. I finished the book. You were right. It had a happy ending after all. I framed it and hung it behind the counter. Not in a flashy way, just in a spot where I could see it when things got too quiet. In the months that followed, soldiers from all over started visiting. Some left behind challenge coins, others just a nod and a thanks. We set up a little bulletin board near the register, a patch from the 100 Honest Airborne, a note from a Navy medic, a Polaroid from a soldier and his daughter who said Daniel's story reminded them what family means. I never met James Thompson, but I think about him often. I think about how he trusted the world enough to leave his son in it, and how fragile that trust is. Sometimes people ask me what I did to deserve the recognition. The answer's simple. I fed a kid who looked like he needed feeding. That's it. I didn't solve poverty. I didn't save the world. I made pancakes. But for that boy, maybe that was enough. Maybe sometimes being seen being offered something warm without strings or suspicion is the difference between giving up and getting through. Almost a year to the day after Daniel first walked into the diner, I found something waiting for me at my station before my shift. It was small, round, heavy in a way you don't expect from something that fits in the palm of your hand. A challenge coin, on one side the insignia of the US Army Special Forces, on the other something that made me pause, semper memor, always remembering. No note, no envelope, just the coin. I looked around the diner quiet, just the way the mornings usually started. The booths were empty, the coffee not yet finished brewing, the street outside still half asleep. Whoever left it didn't want recognition, just to be remembered. I slipped the coin into my apron pocket, and it stayed there all day. Its weight, though small, kept me grounded, like an anchor, like a reminder. Later that evening, as I untied my apron, Mark walked up holding a new sign for the window. Simple black letters on white background. Nothing fancy. It read, "Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry." He didn't say anything, just nodded once and hung it. I nodded back. No speeches, no patting ourselves on the back. Just an understanding between two people who used to see the world differently and now maybe saw it the same. After the story of Daniel spread, something shifted in town. Folks started asking about that booth. Strangers came in, left generous tips for someone in need. Families I'd never seen before showed up, quiet, cautious, and left full not just from the food, but from the feeling that they weren't alone. And veterans, they came too, sometimes with full families, sometimes alone. Some talked. Others just sat with coffee and stared out the window. One woman retired Air Force, from what I gathered, slipped me a note one morning. I lost someone over there too. Thank you for giving us a place where grief and gratitude can sit together. I didn't reply, didn't need to. We started a fundraiser that spring. Small at first. Just a tip jar labelled for the ones who wait. But the town caught wind of it, and before long we raised enough to start a small emergency fund. Something to help the kids whose parents were deployed. Meals, supplies, even just a pair of shoes or a warm coat. Mark matched the donations himself. quietly, said something about how his old man used to feed neighborhood kids, whether they could pay or not. Guess the old man had it right, he muttered one day while restocking sugar packets. And me? I kept doing what I always did, tying my apron, pouring coffee, watching people. But I changed too. I started seeing things I hadn't noticed before. The mother who counted change before ordering a single plate to share with her kids. The young man who sat by the window every Thursday like clockwork, just sipping water. The teenager with the oversized hoodie and tired eyes who always lingered near the pastries but never bought one. I saw them. And I brought them pancakes. Sometimes I think about Daniel. Not every day, but when the diner gets quiet, or when a new kid walks in with the same two careful eyes, I wonder if he's still reading, if he's still carrying his dad in his heart. I like to think he is. That summer, a school group came in after a field trip. You could tell they'd been out in the sun too long, flushed cheeks, sweaty brows, and the kind of excitement that bounces off the walls. One little girl, maybe 7 or 8, tugged on my apron as I was refilling waters. "My dad says you're a hero," she said with the kind of confidence only kids have. Is that true? I crouched down so I could meet her eyes. "I don't think so, sweetheart. I just made breakfast." She looked at me like I was missing the point. "Yeah, but it mattered, right?" I smiled. Yeah, it mattered. Later, her teacher, a woman with tired kindness in her smile, came up to me and said, "No, not all hunger is for food. What you do here, it fills more than stomachs." That stuck with me, because it's true. Some folks are starving for warmth, for safety, for someone to look them in the eye and say, "You matter," without ever saying the words. Daniel never told me his story. I never asked. And somehow that made all the difference, because sometimes what people need most isn't your questions, it's your quiet, your plate of pancakes, your steady hand, your presence. About 2 weeks after the little girl's visit, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar, loopy, careful, and a little shaky. It was from Daniel. "Dear Miss Claire, Grandpa says it's okay to write you now. I've been thinking about that day, the last time I saw the diner, and how I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't know what to say. I still don't really, but I wanted you to know something." I started writing stories, like full ones, with chapters and stuff. Grandpa lets me use his old laptop. A lot of them are about kids who go through hard things but end up okay. Sometimes they find magic, sometimes just good people, sometimes pancakes. One of the stories has a waitress in it. She's not a superhero. She doesn't fly or anything, but she always knows when someone needs something. She brings food without asking, and somehow she makes the whole world feel a little softer. She reminds me of you. Love, Daniel. I framed that one too. Right next to his first note. Didn't tell anyone. It's not for show, it's for me. For the quiet moments, for the reminders. The coin still lives in my pocket. The plaque still guards the corner booth. And sometimes, when the morning sun hits the window just right, I swear I can see that little boy, book in hand, head down, fork moving fast, like he's afraid the food might vanish. But it didn't. Because kindness doesn't vanish. It ripples. Maybe that's the real truth. We all go through things we don't talk about. We all carry weight. Some hide it better than others. But a small act, one unnoticed kindness, can shift something. Just a little. That's what Daniel taught me. And what his father, in his final words, reminded me, sometimes feeding a hungry child without asking why they're hungry is the greatest kindness of all. So I keep showing up. I keep making pancakes. I keep seeing people the way I saw him. And if I do it right, maybe someone else will feel like they're not invisible, that they're safe, even just for one meal. That someone in the world noticed them and said, without saying a word, you matter. And if that's all I ever do, well, that's enough.